Hello and welcome to our FODMAP chat session. My name is Alana Scott and I'm the founder of A Little Bit Yummy and I'm going to be your host today. Today we are chatting to Lyndal Collins from the Monash University FODMAP research team. Lyndal is a registered dietitian. She is an absolute, knowledge source on the FODMAP diet, and it is so lovely that she is joining the show today. So hello, Lyndal.
Hi, thanks for having me, Alana.
Now, Lyndal, just before we go any further, I just want to explain what Monash University does. So Monash University is currently the leading research provider for the low FODMAP diet. And so they're your one-stop shop for FODMAP information and for really up-to-date information as well. So if you haven't checked them out before, make sure you check out monashfodmap.com. There is a link scrolling across the bottom of this video at the moment. And then just before we jump into our topic for the day, which is going to be 5 common FODMAP mistakes, I just know that some of you are going to have questions as you listen along, and we love questions. We want you to leave your questions in the comments under this video, and then what we'll do is after this chat session, we'll respond to your comments with helpful links or, try and answer your questions to the best of our ability. So leave us a comment below. Now, topic of the day, common FODMAP mistakes. So I'm going to throw you out sort of 5 common mistakes, and I want you to give us some helpful solutions so that we can progress through this low FODMAP diet process, figure out our trigger foods, and sort of move on with our lives, because no one wants to get stuck in this process.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so the first common mistake that we see all the time is that people are using outdated FODMAP lists. So maybe they got them from their doctor or off Google or their best friend or somewhere else. So what is the issue with the lists that you get from maybe your GP or the lists that you're finding for free on the internet?
Yeah. So these kind of food lists, I guess, the biggest risk there is that they're out of date. And there's lots and lots of out of date FODMAP resources floating around because the diet has been around now for probably 15 or so more years, kind of out there. And the information and the resources change over time. So they become more detailed, give you more information, whereas some of the earlier lists might just be, foods to avoid, foods to have, and let's keep it at that. But unfortunately, it's not quite that simple. And using lists that are a bit like that, very black and white, can often mean that you're actually over-restricting your diet and cutting out a whole heap of things unnecessarily. So the big thing that food lists often miss out on is portion size, which is very, very key on a low FODMAP diet. And what I mean by this is that FODMAPs, it's not a no FODMAP diet. We can still have some FODMAPs in our
no FODMAP diet. There wouldn't be much left, to be honest.
There's not much left, let's be honest. It'd be a fairly depressing food list if it was a no FODMAP diet. So
it'd be like ice cubes and chicken breasts and like
basically just protein. That would be about it, I think. And meat and oil.
That does not sound particularly tasty. It's definitely not healthy, and it's definitely not fantastic for long-term gut health. Okay, so we're not aiming for no FODMAPs, and what do we need to know about, I guess, portion sizes and where to find those accurate pieces of information?
Yeah, exactly. So portion size, as we said, is key, and we want to find, or there's many foods that their FODMAP or the amount of FODMAPs they contain obviously might be small if you eat them in a small amount, but then the more you eat, the more FODMAPs you also consume. So there's kind of this scale at which this serving size or portion size might be totally fine. But if we have too much more, we kind of go over a threshold and might experience symptoms. So that's what we're trying to achieve with a low FODMAP diet, is consuming foods in a correct sort of portion size to prevent symptoms from occurring, but not taking them out altogether.
So the goal here is we're just lowering your overall FODMAP intake. We're not eliminating it. We're just lowering it. And then we want to see how your gut responds. And hopefully that will be, fingers crossed, in a really positive way, and you'll get a reduction in symptoms.
Exactly. So going back to the food list, I guess, saying that they're not black and white, there are a few kind of key foods that are just super, super, super concentrated sources of FODMAPs. And these are things like onion and garlic, which really, they're, in the end, because they're so concentrated, there's not really a safe or low FODMAP serving size of those foods. So they are kind of out for that first step of the diet. However, there are a lot that, like I said, the FODMAPs sort of build up with the more of that food that you eat. So there are safe amounts, and your food lists often don't actually list those safe amounts, or the safe amounts might have changed over time because Monash in particular will retest foods quite frequently over the years, because our food supply can change due to all sorts of factors. We won't go too much into that. That's a whole topic.
That's another FODMAP chat for another day. We could spend 20 minutes easily talking about that. So essentially, the diet's evolving. We're learning more every year. We're getting more data. So where do we go to get updated information?
Yes, exactly. So because it is a very science, evidence-based diet, things do change and develop and evolve over time. So we want to make sure we're using the most up-to-date resources. So things like the Monash FODMAP app, you will find all of those safe or green, what we rate as green, using a traffic light system, amounts of a huge, huge database of foods. So you can go in and check, you know, what you're currently eating and compare it to the list that you'll find in the app and the green or low FODMAP serving size amounts, and then just adjust your usual diet. So you might find that there are things that you have a lot, like onion and garlic, that have to go away for a while. And you may find when you try to reintroduce them that they're okay. You may not. That's part of the diet journey, is identifying those triggers. But you will find all of that low FODMAP serving size information that's up to date in the Monash FODMAP app.
Awesome. So common mistake to avoid is using an outdated food list. So go and download the Monash University FODMAP diet app, and yes, you do have to pay for it, but the money goes straight back into FODMAP diet research, which means they add new foods. What, every month, Lyndal? Every couple of months?
Quite frequently. We're always testing new foods in the lab, so and we try to get them into the app as soon as possible so that you've got that information, and the food list is always expanding.
Awesome. Now, you have just touched on our next common mistake. So the next common mistake we find lots of people making is that they tend to avoid low FODMAP portion sizes of high FODMAP foods. But based on my understanding, totally correct me if I'm wrong here, as long as there's a green rated serving size, you're okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another benefit, I guess, of having the app, in that pretty much every food in there, well, we try our best, and we will be over time making sure this information's added if it's not already there, is where possible for every food listing a safe or a green low FODMAP serving size. So you always know, if there is an amount of this food that I can have, what it is. And it's very upfront, and that you can also see the progression of how portion size affects that safe amount. So you'll find in the app the traffic light system for every food. So for example, avocado is a really good one here.
We're on the same brain wave right now, because I was just going to ask you to use avocado as an example.
Yeah, avocado is a great one. So you'll see in the app that there's a green an amber or orange, and red serving size listed for avocado. So I'm pretty sure off the top of my head, it's 30 grams is the green.
It's
green
about
amount.
2 tablespoons if you don't work in grams. So it's enough for a sandwich. It's great.
Yeah, enough for most people to add to a sandwich or on some toast or something like that. So it's still a doable food. It's not an absolute no-go. But if you you then have a lot more than that, so you'll see as the amount that you have increases, the FODMAP rating goes up. So don't have my up here.
You're going to pull out your handy dandy Monash University FODMAP diet app to check the portion size.
To check this so that I'm making sure I'm giving you the most up-to-date information for avocado. So 30 grams, as we said, is that green or low FODMAP serving size. If you then have, kind of increase that to 45 grams, that's where it becomes sort of moderate in FODMAPs. So that's the kind of tipping point, I guess, where it's going to become moderate. And then at 80 grams, it's considered high FODMAP or red traffic light rating is given. So you can see in there that there's options and clear information about what amount is safe and shouldn't cause you any problems, and then how it sort of progresses as you increase or decrease the serving size.
That's awesome. So the take-home message here is don't be afraid of the green rated serving sizes of foods that might typically be listed as high FODMAP on some of those food lists, because it's all about portion size.
It is. All comes down to portion size.
Awesome. Okay, so moving on to our third common mistake, and that is thinking you need to be symptom-free before you start the FODMAP reintroduction phase.
Yeah, so this is a tricky one, because I guess it comes down to setting realistic expectations when you start any kind of diet therapy, such as a FODMAP diet. So most people will find that within sort of your 2 to 6 weeks of that first step of the diet, where you're reducing your FODMAP intake right down to a low level, that they get good symptom relief. But for some people, it might not be complete symptom relief. So you may see a dramatic improvement, but it's not, you're not symptom free. You've still got things here and there. And that's where other therapies can be really handy to come in and address those things. So, for example, you might find that your bloating really, really improves with the diet, but you're still suffering from a bit of constipation, like you did previously. So working with a dietitian who might be able to suggest some other dietary modifications, or adding in something like a fiber supplement or some other therapies in conjunction with the diet can help. But also just acknowledging that symptoms or gut, our gut is a very dynamic place and it's also very strongly connected to our brain. The nervous systems in the gut and the brain are really intrinsically linked. So day-to-day fluctuations in things like our stress levels and our anxiety can affect our gut and our symptoms. So you may see that, on days where you're experiencing high stress at work, you have more gut symptoms. And that's despite being on, a FODMAP reduced diet, that they still come through. And that just comes down to that strong gut brain connection. And there may again be other things you can introduce there therapy wise to assist, such as seeing a psychologist to talk about stress relief exercises, or mindfulness meditation, or other, there's so many strategies. Hypnotherapy works really well for some people as well. So it's about setting realistic expectations for yourself, in that diet may not be the 100% solution for you, because there are all of these other factors that can impact our gut and our experience of IBS symptoms. So we don't want that to prevent us from progressing with the diet. If you have seen a significant improvement, it's not a long-term diet that level of FODMAP restriction that we use in the beginning, it's not recommended for the long term, because we know that it might have potentially not detrimental effects on the gut, but there are things, certain properties that FODMAPs have, such as prebiotic properties that could be really beneficial to get back in to promote our gut health in the long term. So we don't want to be on that really restrictive diet. You also don't want to have to worry about being on a restrictive diet in the long term, because
it is hard work. It is really hard work. As someone who's been through the FODMAP journey,
yes, and me too. It can be really hard work. So we want to get you back into a more relaxed way of eating as soon as possible. So set realistic expectations from the beginning, working with a FODMAP trained dietitian to really, fine tune it all as best as you possibly can and address all those other factors that might be also contributing to your symptoms. But don't delay working through the reintroduction step of the diet and trying to get some of the FODMAPs back in and work out what your actual triggers might be.
Yeah, so if you've been on the diet for 4 weeks, then it's really time to start thinking about your FODMAP reintroductions. And I guess now's probably a really good place to point out that I think is around 25% of people won't respond to the FODMAP diet. And so if that's you and your symptoms haven't improved, I'm guessing maybe it's time to walk away from the diet. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So research has shown us that around about 25% of people don't seem to respond to a FODMAP diet. And that could be for a range of reasons. As I sort of already mentioned, there's so many other factors that can trigger IBS symptoms and affect our gut health. So it's really important that if you're not responding, don't stay on a restrictive diet, because it's not benefiting you. And there's plenty of other really well-researched evidence-based therapies out there that you can try. So again, speaking to your specialist or your GP or even your dietitian, if you were working with one initially, they'll be able to refer you on to some of those other resources or practitioners that can assist you with trying other therapies.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Hopefully that helps some people out there who are just not sure what to do next. Okay, so our next common mistake is around people panicking about FODMAP stacking. Is this something you actually need to worry about? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, look, my thoughts in general is that FODMAP stacking, just to, I guess, define that first, what that actually means.
Good point.
So this is where in the app, like we mentioned, you'll find all of the green serving sizes or the low FODMAP serving sizes of different foods in there. And one of the common questions we get from people is that if I have a green serving size of this food and then a green serving size of that food and this food and this food and this food, all these foods combined into one meal, am I then going to overdo it in terms of the FODMAPs that are found in that meal in its entirety? And in general, the answer is probably not. It's probably nothing that you need to worry about. And the green serving sizes in the app have been designed in such a way that you can do that. So you can have your green serving size of avocado plus a green serving size of carrot plus a green serving size of find something else. Lettuce, tomato, all of those foods that are in the app that you might be putting into your meal. The app's been designed in such a way that those serving sizes can be combined pretty safely. For the vast majority of people are not going to experience any issues doing that. Where FODMAP stacking might come into play is more for someone who has really, really sensitive intestines or very severe IBS, and might be, their level of tolerance to that FODMAP load at a big meal where you've combined lots of green amounts together might be lower. So they that's where, again, working with a dietitian who's really well FODMAP trained can come in and sort of troubleshoot that with you if you do seem to fall into that really severe IBS category where you're highly, highly sensitive. And they can, workshop that with you to work out what amounts are going to work for you in your particular situation. But in general, stacking doesn't need to be, it's not something we want to stress about, because stress and anxiety and kind of hyper focusing
and all that
fine details, anything that's going to cause you more stress or anxiety could be an external factor that's then going to heighten your IBS symptoms, regardless of what kind of diet you're following. So we really want to have that balance between, working with a dietitian and putting restrictions in place that are only to a level that is necessary for you in your particular personal situation. There's no blanket kind of rule, if you like, for everyone. During that personalization step, everyone's going to have a different diet at the end, their version of a FODMAP diet at the end that works for them.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing now is that, start the FODMAP diet, focus, if it's been recommended for you, obviously, focus on your green rated serving sizes for foods. If after a few weeks you're really not getting good symptom response, check back in with your dietitian, and that's the point where you might have a conversation about FODMAP stacking, or there might be another trigger that hasn't been identified that needs to be resolved.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And there is a really good blog on the monashfodmap.com website around FODMAP stacking, just to reassure you again on those major points.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. And then our fifth common mistake of the day is avoiding challenging high FODMAP foods because you feel anxious. How would you go about tackling this? I know I have personal strategies that we use on a but what would you say to someone who's feeling really anxious about the next step?
Yeah, and look, this can be a real source of anxiety for a lot of people getting to that, particularly if they've experienced really great level of symptom relief on the first phase of the diet. Getting to that reintroduction step can be quite daunting, going, I don't really want to, potentially flare up my symptoms again. But as we said, it's not a lifetime diet, and we don't want you on these kind of restrictions long term, because it will eventually become annoying and cumbersome to have such a limited number of foods that you sort of feel safe eating, I guess. So we want to find that balance. That being said, it's scary for a lot of people, particularly things that are common triggers like your garlic and your onion, which we know are very concentrated sources of FODMAP. So maybe a trigger for a lot of people with IBS. My advice there is go slow. go low and slow in that.
Start small, real small.
Yeah, start tiny. So there is some guidance, again, in the Monash FODMAP app around reintroduction in the diary section, and there's some suggested sort of portion sizes or serving sizes you can use for the reintroduction process. But if you look at those and you are terrified at the quantities and you go, no way am I starting there, that's fine. They are a guide. They're not, again, it's not black and white. So your dietitian, as I keep banging on about working with the dietitian, be honest with your dietitian about how you're feeling around reintroduction. If you are particularly anxious about a particular food that you have been recommended to reintroduce with, they can adjust the amounts and recommend amounts that are going to work for you and kind of that you can get your head around and feel comfortable with. You can also do things like reintroduce small amounts on every second day or every third day, even if you really want to have sort of space it out and have enough time between reintroduction days to kind of recover from any symptoms that may come up for you. So there's no It's not black and white. It's what it keeps coming back down to.
There's no
Your diet
wrong way to reintroduce. You just need
exactly.
to start, and ideally start with a food that contains one FODMAP group, so the results are clear. But this is not a FODMAP, how to do the FODMAP reintroduction. That will be a separate FODMAP chat that we will cover at some point. Lyndal, just before we close off, I know a lot of people's anxiety around the reintroduction phase comes from the fear that they're going to end up in the same place that they did before they started the diet, and that their symptoms from doing a FODMAP reintroduction challenge. So this is where you eat the high FODMAP food for 2 to 3 days, so that to see where your threshold level is or how much you can tolerate. It's going to last a long time. So they're going to eat this food and then they're going to be feeling unwell for weeks. But that's not the case with high FODMAP foods, is it?
No, and that's really not the experience that at least I've come across working with IBS patients in the past. So part of reintroduction is keeping your diet in the background low FODMAP, and you're only reintroducing one food at a time that contains generally one particular type of FODMAP sugar, so that you can assess your tolerance or response to that particular FODMAP. So because we're still keeping our total FODMAP load in the background fairly low, we're not anticipating that we're going to have severe symptoms triggered from just this one particular food. So you can kind of be reassured there that it's not going to, it was very unlikely to render you, what's the word I'm looking for? Unable to do anything for weeks at a time, or, have that huge impact. Look, you may feel a bit like your symptoms flare up for a couple of days, but the great thing about the gut is that things move in, move out fairly quickly. So you're going to have that if you do respond or react to the reintroduction food, you're going to know within that day or that a few hours. And if you do have a strong symptom response on the first day of or first try of reintroducing that food, you stop. That's where you stop reintroduction. You go, that food for me right now isn't working.
So, yeah. The good news there is that instead of thinking of that as a really anxiety-provoking thought, is that getting symptoms during your FODMAP reintroductions is actually, in a weird way, it's really weird way, is a good thing, because you have just identified a FODMAP group that triggers symptoms, which will help you manage your diet in the long term and also relax your diet in the long term, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Knowledge is power when it comes to this. So if you do respond, it's a clear kind of yes or no for most people to say, yes, that particular FODMAP or that particular food seems to be problematic for me at this point in time. So yay, I know this now, and I can then use that knowledge to empower my food choices and avoid flaring up my symptoms, which is the whole end goal of the diet, is to come up with a personalized diet at the end that is going to help you control your symptoms and feel better and lead a better quality of life to what you had previously.
Absolutely. And that is such a good point to end on as well, that the FODMAP diet is this learning journey. The goal is to get you into a better space where you can enjoy a wide variety of food without having to stress that it's going to trigger symptoms. So, Lyndal, thank you so much for answering those common mistakes, giving us some strategies, and just giving us a whole lot more knowledge to put in our FODMAP bank so that we understand what we're doing, how to progress forward, and hopefully so we can keep making solid progress towards our own health goals. Now, before we say our goodbyes, I just want to mention again, please go and get the Monash University FODMAP Diet app. The logo of the app's on the screen right now, so get familiar with that. Go and grab it. And then there's other resources that you can use as well. So monashfodmap.com has a whole range of blog articles and recipes, and a little bit yummy.com also has a whole heap of recipes and resources for you to explore as well. So there's plenty out there for you to look at and explore, and hopefully that will all help you on your FODMAP journey. Now, Lyndal, It's been an absolute pleasure interviewing you. Thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge. And hopefully we'll get to talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me, Alana, and I hope that was a good insight into some of those common mistakes for everyone.
It definitely was. Okay, and for everyone who has left a comment under the video, we will try and post some resources and responses back to you when we get a moment. So thank you for engaging with us, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.